Hi, I'm Rufus. I built a company from the ground up, and then my own daughter erased me from it. She took the name off the building, cut my health insurance, even forged my signature to move millions behind my back. I wasn't invited to the firm's anniversary, but I watched the live stream, saw them cheer for her, like I never existed. Now she says she wants to talk, but after all the lies, the silence, the cold boardroom betrayal, what would you do if your child turned your life's work into a battlefield? Would you fight for the truth, or just to be remembered? I arrived just after 6. The parking lot was still empty, dew clinging to the windshield like frost. My old sedan, out of place among the newer, sleeker models, hummed to silence. I adjusted the cuffs of my blazer and stepped out, boots scraping against the gravel. The front lobby lights were already on, as they always were, but something didn't sit right. The brass plaque that had once welcomed clients, the Harrow Group Est 1984, was gone. In its place stood a new sign, sharp and metallic, polished to a cold gleam. Holland Creed. The font screamed detachment. I stood there, one hand on the door, staring at it as if the name itself had slapped me. No mention of me, no tribute, not even a footnote. I walked around the building, almost hoping I'd missed something, but the side entrance bore the same logo. I pressed my ID card to the scanner, an old reflex. The red light blinked twice. Denied. I tried again. Nothing. Security emerged from behind the glass. A young man in a blazer 2 sizes too big. His name tag read Carlos. "Mr. Harrow?" His voice wavered. I'm sorry, sir. I've been instructed. Your access was removed last week." I stared at him for a moment, not in anger, but in disbelief. "No one told me." He shifted, clearly uncomfortable. "I don't know what to say." I wasn't here then." I nodded once, stiffly, and turned without another word. The main entrance was unlocked, still open to the public, I supposed. The guest elevator was slow, as it had always been. Each floor's ding echoed a little louder than the last. When the doors slid open to the executive level, I stepped into silence. Debbie, my secretary for 20 years, now Marla's, pretended to be engrossed in her screen. I stood there, waiting. She didn't look up. I cleared my throat softly. Still nothing. I walked past her desk, reached Marla's office, and knocked. Firm, but not angry. No answer. I tried again. Silence. Then footsteps. An intern passed behind me, a young woman with a lanyard full of access tags. "You here for the legacy tour?" she asked, tilting her head politely. I managed a half smile. Something like that. Inside the break room, everything had changed. Sleeker machines, trendy bar stools. The old leather chairs I used to favor were gone. I poured myself a cup of decaf, sat at the far window overlooking the city skyline. Portland was waking up. A name on a door used to mean something. I murmured aloud. No one heard me. I dialed Marla. Straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. The hallway felt longer walking back. My feet, once so familiar with these floors, hesitated. I stopped by my old guest office. The door was ajar. Inside, the room was sterile. The shelves, once lined with industry awards, framed photos of our first clients, were bare. The drawer where I kept my pens, my notes, was empty. But what struck hardest was the desk. A welcome packet sat neatly atop it. New hire orientation. Holland Creed. I flipped through. There it was. The firm's origin story. Now edited. Rebranded. No mention of Rufus Harrow. I stood quietly for a beat, the paper still in my hand. Then I left it there and closed the door behind me. Back in the lobby, a maintenance worker was fastening a new nameplate to the reception wall. President, Marla Creed. Below it, a smaller plaque read, Founder Emeritus, but the space beneath was blank. He glanced at me, unsure if he should nod. I didn't make it easier for him. Outside, the air was crisper now. Fall had crept in overnight, curling leaves underfoot. I walked to the curb, paused at the intersection. The direction home was to the right. I turned left. Victor Ellsworth's office wasn't far. I hadn't stepped into his law firm in nearly 15 years, Not since we finalized my wife's estate, but this morning, I had business to attend to. The brass plate on Victor's office door hadn't changed. The hallway smelled the same too, dust, varnish, and the ghost of pipe tobacco. It was the only hallway in Portland that still held its age with pride. I didn't knock. I just turned the handle and walked in. Victor looked up from his desk and nodded once. "Oh, you look older," he said, voice even. I closed the door behind me. "I am." We didn't shake hands. Didn't need to. The space between us had always been filled by shared time, losses buried, trusts established, and one late wife we both missed more than we admitted. He gestured to the seat across from him. I sat slowly. "You walked in like something's broken," he added. "It is." I pulled the printout from my coat and slid it across the desk. His brow furrowed as he read it. "They're charging you rent?" he asked. $2,400 a month for using an office I designed, sent it to my personal email, and copied the rest of the board like I was some tenant behind on payments. He let out a sound halfway between a grunt and a sigh. "You sure you want to fight this?" "I'm not fighting. I'm documenting." He nodded again, opened a drawer, and pulled out the latest company magazine. I recognized the layout before he even opened it, the same branding team we'd used in '09, same fonts, same silk finish. He flipped to the cover. Marla Creed, Modernizing the Legacy. Her face was frozen mid-laugh, confident, polished, glossy. "Inside's worse," he muttered, handing it to me. I scanned the first few pages. No mention of me, not even in the timeline, as though the firm had appeared from thin air one Tuesday morning, built by Marla's sheer will and perfect cheekbones. "She's thorough," I said. Victor tapped the page. "They erased you. Properly." "Not entirely," I said. "Not yet." He leaned back, steepling his fingers. "You want to trigger the Founder's Reserve?" I reached for the old pen resting on the edge of his desk, the one my wife gave me on our 20th anniversary, the day we filed the first LLC paperwork. It still held the faint scratch on the barrel where Nora had once tried to engrave her name with a paperclip. "I want to see what happens," I said, "when she has to build something without stealing it." Victor gave a slow nod. Then he stood, walked to the far cabinet, and turned a key. I hadn't seen that key in years. He slid open the bottom drawer and pulled out a folder. Red, slightly worn, thick with paper. He laid it on the table like it weighed more than it should. "Trust documents," he said. "You never revoked them. Most people don't even know they exist anymore." I flipped open the first page. My own signature stared back at me, youthful and clean, from a date stamped 1998. Back when I still ran marathons and believed legacy was something you handed down like a medal. "She doesn't know about these?" Victor shook his head. "She will soon." We sat for a long moment without speaking. A car honked outside, somewhere across the street. Someone laughed too loudly. But in here, the silence was clean. He slid the folder toward me. "You may want to sit down, Rufus. There's something in here she never knew existed." I didn't sit. I stood, one hand still on the pen, the other on the edge of the folder. Something shifted, not in the room, but inside me. Victor hadn't flinched when I made the call. Maybe he expected it. Maybe he was just waiting for me to be ready. He opened the folder and turned the pages with care. Not drama. The pages were old but crisp, sealed in plastic sleeves, Founders' Reserve clauses, property rights, intellectual ownership. One clause caught my eye. 60% of the real estate, patents, and foundational infrastructure was still tied to my personal trust, my name, my signature, still alive in ink. I said nothing, just nodded. He understood. "I'll make a certified copy. You'll need this." He paused. "She doesn't know these exist." "That's the point," I said. The copy machine buzzed behind me. Its rhythm was the only noise in that quiet room. Outside, the light had shifted. Afternoon had leaned into late, touching the buildings with orange. I drove home in silence. The house greeted me like always, with stillness, No music, no footsteps. I walked through the front hallway, shoes echoing on hardwood. I dropped my keys in the same ceramic bowl Nora had glazed decades ago. It wobbled slightly, like it missed her hand. The study was cold, not from temperature, but vacancy. I lit the fireplace anyway, more for the crackle than the heat. The flickering light painted the room gold. My eyes wandered to the calendar tacked beside the bookshelf. A red circle, October 17th, 40th anniversary gala, scribbled in Nora's handwriting. She had written it before she died, when we still thought I'd be on the stage for that one. I leaned back in the armchair and stared at the ceiling. Later that night, I opened my laptop, found the live stream of the event. There was Marla, bathed in stage lights, microphone in hand. She stood under the company banner, redesigned but familiar. The host called her visionary of the new era. The audience clapped like trained seals. Then came the montage, stock footage, photoshopped images, smiles curated for press releases. Not a single picture of me. 40 years, and I was reduced to a phantom. I watched until the end. No mention. Not even a thank you to those who came before. I shut the laptop, whispered to the room. Not even a footnote. The next morning, I walked back into the building, not for drama, just clarity. I needed to feel what had changed. The security guard nodded politely but didn't use my name. I stepped into the elevator. A young associate entered behind me, likely no older than 26. She smiled. "Were you a client, sir? Or a vendor?" "Something like that," I said. She didn't press. The door opened, and she got off 2 floors up. I stayed in until the top, walked the corridor like a museum visitor. Back home, I dug through the storage trunk in the hallway closet, found the newspaper Nora had saved, the one with the article about our firm's grand opening. The photo showed her in a dark green coat, holding the ribbon-cutting scissors. I stood behind her, hand on her shoulder, eyes forward, hopeful, determined. Before the ink dried on our first contract, I took the clipping out gently and placed it on the desk, right where the firelight could touch it. The sun set early. October does that. As the light faded, I heard the mail slot snap. A letter. Formal envelope. Sharp font. My name misspelled by 1 letter. Notice of access revocation. No more emails, no more credentials, just silence. I sat there, read it twice, then reached for the phone. "Victor," I said, "activate the first asset hold." Let's see what gets their attention. By 9 o'clock a.m., I was already in the building. No invitation, no clearance, no apology. The receptionist looked up briefly, then back down to her monitor, her fingers twitching near the intercom but never pressing it. Maybe she remembered who I was. Maybe not. Either way, she didn't stop me. The elevator ride felt longer than usual. It stopped twice, once for 2 interns chatting about office yoga, once for a delivery man with a rolling crate of pastries. Neither gave me more than a passing glance. That was the thing about aging. They stop seeing you, even when you're still breathing. When the elevator opened on the executive floor, I stepped out slowly. The hallway lights had that hospital brightness, sterile and overly white. A young HR assistant crossed paths with me and immediately busied himself with the papers in his hand. Coffee carts passed me by without an offer. No greetings, no nods. The boardroom doors were open when I arrived. I walked in like I owned the place, because once, I did. Marla stood near the projection screen, gesturing with a laser pointer. Mid-sentence, she froze. Her eyes landed on me. Just a flicker. Then she turned back to the board. As discussed, today's vote will finalize the advisory restructure and implement long-term leadership adjustments. I didn't sit at the table. I found the old chair in the corner. Near the ficus, no one watered anymore, and sat there, quietly. No one acknowledged me. No one needed to. The vote proceeded. Names flashed on the screen. Tally boxes turned green. Motion passed. The final line read, "Effective immediately. Rufus Harrow is removed from all strategic oversight roles." My name glowed on the screen like a scar. Then it disappeared. A junior legal associate approached, fumbling with a manila folder. "This is for you, sir." Compliance requires it. Inside was the kind of packet I used to review for other executives: termination documents, privacy waivers, signature lines. But this one included something new: my medical benefits, the plan I had arranged after Nora's death, now discontinued. "For compliance purposes," the associate mumbled. I didn't respond. I folded the papers precisely, pressed the corners flat, and placed the folder back in his hands. Then I stood. "This company used to take care of its people," I said, my voice even but loud enough. "Now it discards them like spoiled fruit." Chairs creaked, eyes lowered. I continued. "You voted me out. That's your right. But don't forget, this room, these lights, this board, this brand, none of it existed before me." I looked around the table, one by one, every face. Most looked away, except Marla. She held my gaze with the same icy defiance she inherited from me. I didn't stay for questions. As I turned to leave, I heard it, barely a whisper, but enough to freeze a room. "Did he know about the German patent deal?" It came from the far end of the table, one of the newer VPs. Marla's neck stiffened. I kept walking. Back in the elevator, I pulled out my phone and dialed Victor. "It's time," I said. "Start freezing the assets under Clause 7. I didn't wait for his reply. I ended the call. Victor called just after 11. I was standing in the doorway between the den and the kitchen, holding a half-warm cup of coffee I'd reheated twice already. The line clicked, no pleasantries. "Accounts frozen. All assets tied to the trust are under lockdown. Notifications went out 10 minutes ago." I nodded into the silence, more to myself than him. "Good," I said, and hung up. Outside the rain had started, light but steady, trailing slow patterns down the window pane. I stood there for a long while, just watching it. The garden blurred in the distance, trees swaying gently in the gray light. Somewhere beyond the glass, I knew panic had already started unraveling. I didn't eat lunch, didn't feel hungry, just sat at the kitchen table, phone face down beside me. The rain's rhythm was the only sound until it wasn't. The first buzz came like a knock, then another, then 5. Voicemails stacked, texts multiplied. I picked the phone up once to glance at a name. Marla played the voicemail. "Dad, something's wrong with the German licensing account. It's not processing. Something's wrong with the back end. Call me." I didn't. Instead, I slipped on my old raincoat, the one Nora had insisted was too faded for public use, and stepped into the yard. The afternoon had cooled. I walked past the hedges, past the stone bench, toward the old sycamore planted the day we got married. Elias Boone stood there, shears in hand, staring at the roots. "She told me to cut it down," he said without turning. I stepped beside him. The tree's bark was speckled, gnarled but alive. Leaves shimmered, gold against the gray sky. "I didn't," he added. I put a hand on his shoulder. He didn't move. We stood in silence, not needing more. Back inside. I dried my hands and opened the envelope Victor had couriered the night before. Thick stack. Every document carefully marked, timeline of asset transfers, digital rights protections, silent partner agreements, real estate titles under the trust, page after page. I saw my own decisions staring back, decisions made decades ago, filed and forgotten, now returning with sharp edges, obsolete. That's what they called me. But this was legacy. Not tweets or press releases, not coffee mugs with the new logo. This was what they never thought to look for. The firm cracked first by late afternoon. I didn't check the news, but I didn't need to. I got a text from Wallace Sims, one of the last old guards still hanging around that building. "Payroll failed. Vendor calls non-stop. Client access locked." I typed back one word: intentional. He replied within seconds. "You just made the board panic. Good." I stared at the screen, then wrote, "They drew first blood." The evening settled in, but the storm hadn't passed. I lit the fireplace, the warmth creeping into the corners of the room. I poured a glass of bourbon, neat, as Nora preferred. When the phone rang again, I knew she wouldn't leave a voicemail this time. I picked up. "I know what you did. Marla said. Her voice was clipped, rehearsed. I waited a beat. You don't know the half of it, I replied. But you will. She hung up before I could say more. I called Victor next. Prepare the document packet for the auditors, I said. Use the backup folder, the one labeled Lexington. He didn't ask why. Just said, understood. I looked out at the garden one last time. Elias had gone. The tree stood untouched. The email came at 8:14 a.m. Sharp. Just a simple line. Thank you. Review scheduled. No signature, no warmth. But that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was the copy of the file Victor had sent, over 100 pages, time-stamped, notarized, legally airtight, was now in the inbox of the Oregon State Regulatory Board. I didn't reply. I didn't forward it. I didn't call anyone. I simply closed the laptop, stood, and walked to the front window of my study. The wind outside stirred the sycamore, the same tree Elias Boone refused to cut. Let the storm bloom on its own. Across town, I imagined the meeting room lighting flickering on. Marla would be there first. She always was. Not from discipline, but to be the one already seated when others arrived. An old dominance trick. Her tone in these meetings was clipped, brisk, always layered in careful praise before the sting. I want to address something, she'd say. You've probably heard some chatter. I want to clarify. She'd cue up a video, a tightly edited clip, Rufus Harrow, gray-haired and stately, speaking in measured tones, except the audio would be warped, repositioned, just enough. Legacy, outdated, resistance to change, childish behavior. The words, carefully trimmed from a dozen conversations, now repurposed. The screen would fade. She'd cross her arms and say, My father has been ceremonial for years, emotionally reactive. He hasn't influenced major decisions since 2020. In rooms like those, perception spreads faster than fact. Victor sent a 2-word text. They moved. I answered, good. Later that day, he followed up with a screenshot of a headline, internal staff memo leaked from Holland Creed. The gist, leadership transition formalized. Advisory reassigned. The phrase ceremonial father was underlined in bold. I turned off the phone and went downstairs. The house was quiet, too quiet. I made tea, but didn't drink it. Just held the mug for warmth. It wasn't long before the real poison was dropped. A manipulated audio clip leaked to a corporate gossip blog. The clip painted me as sneering, dismissive, out of touch. I allegedly mocked junior staff, scoffed at diversity, and belittled Marla's leadership style. It was sloppy, but the effect was immediate. Victor texted again. Legal preemption attempt. They're trying to box you in. I didn't respond right away. Then typed, They're flailing. Let them. That night, after dinner, an old friend from the firm showed up. Henry Langston. Been with us since the beginning. More beard than hair now. A limp in his left leg from a skiing accident he never liked to explain. Can't stay long, he said, lowering his voice. Marla doesn't know I came. He handed me a flash drive. Original files. The full conversation from that retreat in Tahoe. It proves they cut it, twisted it. He stood in my foyer, eyes scanning the walls. I told her not to do this, but she doesn't listen. Not to me, not to anyone anymore. I said nothing, just took the drive, nodded, and thanked him. After he left, I sat down in the den, inserted the drive, and played the original clip. There I was, calm, measured, defending the young staffers, pushing for better training, advocating for keeping the mentorship program, so much for context. By dawn, the file was uploaded, quietly, onto Holland Creed's internal training server under a benign label, 2020 Staff Development Recommendations. No announcement, no broadcast, just there for anyone curious enough. By noon, I'd received 3 anonymous messages. He was trying to help us. That wasn't what she said. I'm rethinking everything. Whispers don't stay whispers for long. That afternoon, in the boardroom, Marla walked in late. They say someone had pinned a sticky note to her chair, not ceremonial anymore. That night, as the rain returned, my inbox chimed. A new message. Pre-litigation meeting requested by opposing counsel next Monday. I stared at the screen for a long time. Monday would come. But I wasn't walking into court. I was walking into war. The mediation room smelled like stale coffee and furniture polish. It was the kind of place designed to look neutral, to lower voices and temper pride, the kind of room that pretended fairness just by its decor. I stepped in first. The mediator greeted me with a practiced smile, gesturing to the end of the table. The chair creaked a bit under me, cheap, functional. 2 minutes later, Marla's attorney walked in, alone. "She's not coming," he said. She declined to attend, emotional strain. I slid a folder across the table. Clause 14, I said. Founder's equity position, still active. He didn't reach for it immediately, just looked at me like I was bluffing. But when he finally opened it and saw the 2005 memo with Harold's signature and the board's seal, his face changed. Slight twitch around the eyes. His fingers tightened on the folder's edge. "This was never nullified," I added, calm as ever. "It was just overlooked, conveniently." No one responded. The mediator cleared his throat, took notes he'd never reference again, and called for a break. By then, Victor was sitting across from Travis Keene at a downtown cafe. I'd asked Victor to take that meeting, and only Victor. No aides, no agenda, just two men who understood what legacy meant. "We didn't sign with a brand," Travis said, stirring his espresso. "We signed with a man named Rufus." Victor smiled. "He remembers." Travis sipped, then added, "We'll give them 72 hours. If nothing changes, we pull the plug. I want my name attached to something with actual credibility." Victor nodded. Understood. 2 days later, the news broke. Soft. No headlines. 3 more clients quietly paused negotiations. 1 froze billing indefinitely. Inside Holland Creed, staff whispered between cubicles. Marla held firm in public, but her calendar grew emptier by the hour. I stayed home, mostly, sat in the study with tea I never finished. I watched the sycamore shift in the wind, thought of Nora. "This isn't sabotage," I said aloud, to no one. "It's restoration." Marla finally called the next evening. Her voice was sharper than usual. No preamble. "What are you doing?" I leaned back in my chair. "Nothing you didn't start," I said. "I'm just finishing it. Cleaner." Silence stretched across the line. Then a click. That night, while I sorted through old client contracts, a knock came at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. On the porch, a courier in a blazer, holding a legal envelope with a wax seal I hadn't seen in decades. "Sign here, Mr. Harrow." I took the envelope inside and sliced it open carefully. Inside, a formal notice. Private arbitration, requested by the board, enforced by their counsel. It was dated and signed that morning. I read it twice, then walked to the shelf and pulled down my father's old ledger. Leather-wrapped, corners worn, pages yellowed. I placed the envelope beside it and let the weight of both settle on the desk. "They want a private war now," I whispered. "Good." I turned off the light. I was raised to fight quiet battles. The room was colder than it had any right to be. Not just the air conditioning, it was the way people didn't look up, the way their words clipped short like they'd rehearsed them too many times. I sat down without saying anything. My chair didn't creak. My suit was dark charcoal, pressed just enough, the kind that says, "I'm not here to fight, I'm here to finish what you couldn't," across the table. 3 panelists sat behind sleek silver nameplates. They introduced themselves briskly. I remembered none of their names. Marla walked in last. She didn't acknowledge me. 2 attorneys flanked her, both younger than the decade-old coffee stain on my office rug. The firm's counsel opened quickly, asserting my removal was lawful and my recent maneuvers were hostile acts. I let them finish. Then I slid the manila envelope across the table. No theatrics, just paper. "This is a third-party audit," I said. "Requested independently, completed last month." The panelists leaned forward as I flipped to marked pages. Pages with line items, miscoded expenses, accounts opened offshore, money moved in circles until it vanished. No raised voice, just numbers. There was a pause, thick and growing. Then one of Marla's lawyers cleared his throat and asked for a recess. We broke for 15 minutes. I didn't go far, just leaned against the hallway window. watching clouds gather over the Willamette. One panelist approached me with a paper cup of lukewarm coffee. "You planned this for a while, didn't you?" he asked. I didn't lie. "I planned it when she stopped calling me Dad." Back inside, we resumed. Victor opened a slim laptop and projected a document. Digital forensic analysis. A $1.7 million asset transfer. Signed, supposedly, by me. But the metadata told another story. My signature, lifted from an old PDF, pasted without consent. Fraud. Document tampering. Marla's lawyers squirmed. One objected. The lead arbitrator waved him down. "I never authorized it," I said. "Didn't even know the account existed." Silence landed like an anvil. Marla shifted in her seat, lips parted, trying to speak, but nothing came out. Then it did. "That wasn't my directive. It came from lower management." Victor clicked again. Screenshots, emails, time-stamped, her name, her language. "I trust this concludes the matter," he said quietly. Marla stared at the screen, hollow-eyed. One panelist looked nauseous. Another began writing furiously. My hands remained still on the table, folded. "Any further testimony?" the lead asked. No one answered. The arbitrator straightened his jacket. "This panel will deliberate. Final ruling within 5 business days." As I gathered my folder, I passed Marla's chair. She didn't move, didn't look, just sat there, small in a room she once stormed. Outside, the sun had dipped beneath the skyline, casting long shadows on the sidewalk. My phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. "Mr. Harrow?" The voice was tentative, aged by time. "This is Delilah Connors." I blinked. "Delilah, my late wife's former assistant. There's something I've held on to," she said. "A letter. Your wife left it with me, with instructions. I was to give it to you only when it was finally over." I said nothing. My voice caught somewhere behind my ribs. "I'll bring it by tonight," she added softly. "She wanted you to read it alone." I hung up, walked 2 more blocks. Found myself in front of the same diner where we used to share pie at midnight. That night, I'd open a letter written in the past, to help me understand the future. The envelope was soft with time, the edges worn as if it had traveled further than Portland ever could. Delilah had handed it to me with both palms, like she was giving back something sacred, and in a way, she was. My wife's handwriting on the front, the ink faint but unmistakable. It was dated 2 weeks before she passed. I sat at the kitchen table. The only sound was the ticking of the wall clock above the stove. I unfolded the letter slowly. Her cursive had always leaned left, like it carried a secret only I was supposed to know. "Rufus," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm already gone, and something has happened between you and Marla. I don't know what, but I know you both, and I know pain when it plants its roots." I felt the breath leave my chest. She continued, "Don't fight her for the company. Fight for what she forgot, how she was raised. Fight for the part of her that still remembers helping you fix that old fence in the summer of '98, or sneaking out to buy me roses on our anniversary when you were tight on cash. That girl is still in there somewhere." I stopped, folded the page shut with shaking hands, then reopened it. "She may never apologize, but if you carry this war too far, you'll win and still lose." I raised her with steel and grace. "Please, Rufus, don't let justice turn you to iron." There were smudges in the lower corner. Ink, maybe, or maybe something else. I closed the letter like it was a living thing. My heart didn't feel righteous anymore. It just felt tired. The morning sun broke over the rooftops when my iPad chimed. A FaceTime call from Ellie, Marla's daughter. She was still in pajamas. Front tooth missing, cheeks flushed from brushing. "Grandpa," she said, "are you coming to my recital? Mommy said you're busy fighting." I blinked fast. "What day is it?" "Today," she beamed. 3 o'clock. I'm second on the program." I nodded. "I'll be there. Kiddo, I promise." She smiled like it fixed something. Maybe it did. After the call, I pulled the storage trunk from the hallway closet. Dust bloomed as I opened it. Inside were the photos the firm had quietly boxed up. Snapshots of 20, 30 years, ribbon cuttings, employee picnics. Marla on my shoulders, 8 years old, cheering as if I'd built the skyline with my bare hands. I hung them in the hallway, one by one. No words, no narrative, just truth framed in walnut and brass. I didn't do it to prove anything to anyone, just to remember the man I'd been, and the one I still was. That afternoon, Victor dropped by, no tie, 2 fingers of bourbon in hand. He raised his glass before speaking. "The arbitration ruling's in," he said. "Partial restitution. They have to acknowledge your trust, formally, publicly." I raised my brow. And you were right. They've been ordered to rebuild the financial trail and provide you all IP documentation, retroactive. I nodded. Let them keep the new name. I kept the principles. Victor offered a rare smile. Still playing the long game, huh? It's the only one that matters. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the quiet hum of a house still standing. Later that evening, I checked my inbox. One new message. Subject line: apology? The sender was Marla. I clicked it open. The body was blank. No words, no pleasantries, just an attachment. Notice of board resignation, effective immediately. No explanation, no signature flourish, just a file. I stared at the screen, fingers unmoving, heart steady but unquiet. Maybe it was surrender. Maybe it was her version of love, twisted, delayed, but present. I clicked on the document. I opened the attachment. The subject line, apology, had raised a flicker of hope I didn't realize I was still capable of, but the first line crushed it flat. I'm stepping down, not because I failed, but because I refused to explain myself to you. There it was, not a trace of remorse, just a continuation of the cold defiance that had built over years. I let the letter scroll down untouched, not reading further yet. Instead, I leaned back, eyes closed, and let the silence fill the room like fog. By mid-morning, I moved about the kitchen, making eggs I didn't want to eat, the coffee brewed with the slow hiss of routine. I flipped on the television, local news. The anchor's voice, clipped and practiced, spoke over footage of the Holland Creed building. Shares dipped another 7% today, following last week's arbitration decision, affirming founder Rufus Harrow's trust holdings. Analysts are calling it a foundational shakeup. I stirred the eggs absent-mindedly, poured coffee, and turned the volume down. Not out of humility, but exhaustion. After breakfast, I sat at my desk and typed in the firm's website address. Clean layout, modern fonts, crisp photos. No trace of me. I clicked on Our History. Marla's photo led the page. Proud smile, bold vision. I wasn't angry, just hollow. They had rewritten the timeline without me. But you can't erase fingerprints from brick and steel. A knock on the door broke the stillness. Victor, holding a slim black folder and a bottle of something dark. He sat across from me and slid the folder forward. "You still own 2 of the key IP platforms," he said, tapping the folder. "Legally verified. If they try to use them without your sign-off, they'll violate the arbitration ruling." "And if they stop using them?" I asked. "They lose 40% of operations in 90 days. I nodded, then poured us both a drink. No toast, just understanding. That afternoon, I joined a video call with the remaining board members. The room looked different without Marla. Tense, unsure. One of them cleared his throat. "Mr. Harrow, we'd like you to consider returning as Strategic Advisor Emeritus." I shook my head gently. "I'll advise, but not to rebuild what's broken, only to protect the people still trying to do good work." They nodded. No pushback. Just quiet agreement. After the call, I stared out the window for a long time. The city moved without pause, but inside the house, Time stilled. An alert pinged on my laptop. New email. From Marla again. Subject: Can we talk? Just the two of us? I stared at the screen. No text. No explanation. Just that single question. I hesitated, fingers hovering above the keyboard. Then, slowly, I typed one word. When. I arrived 15 minutes early. The bench hadn't changed. Slats of aging wood, flecks of moss near the bolts. Just beyond it, the wind rippled through the grove where we'd scattered her ashes. I set down 2 coffees, one for me, one for her. Even now, she felt more present than the daughter I'd shared a name with, but little else lately. Marla showed up 10 minutes late. Alone, no entourage, no makeup, no mask. Her coat was too thin for the wind that morning, but she didn't shiver. She sat without speaking. "I came," she said finally, "because I don't know who I became." I didn't interrupt. Let the silence do what words couldn't. She looked out at the trees, eyes blinking longer than usual. "I thought winning meant making them forget you, but I ended up forgetting who I was raised by." I didn't nod, didn't reach out, just waited. She took a shaky breath. "I saw myself in the mirror 2 nights ago and realized I looked like someone who builds fires and blames the smoke." From my coat pocket, I pulled out a small USB. I handed it to her wordlessly. She looked at it like it might bite. I tapped my tablet awake and opened the file. She leaned in as the screen flickered to life. Footage grainy but intact. The ribbon-cutting ceremony. Her mother introducing me as the architect, not just of the firm, but of the way they did business back then, with handshakes and handwritten ledgers. Marla watched, lips slightly parted. At one point, she lifted a hand as if to stop the video, but didn't. When it ended, she sat back. "I forgot that version of her," she whispered. "And you?" Silence returned. Then she turned to me. "Why didn't you fight me harder?" I exhaled. "Because your mother asked me not to win against you, only to hope for you." She stared at the bench plank between us, tracing a knot in the wood with her thumb. "She was right," I added softly. "You're worth more than control." She saw that, even when I didn't. Marla reached into her bag and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. She handed it to me. "I've signed over my remaining shares," she said. "They're going to a scholarship fund. Mom's name on it, not mine." I unfolded it, read the header, then looked up. "You don't owe me forgiveness, Gun," she continued, "but I owe her something better than what I've been." We sat for another minute, then she stood. "I'll see you at Nora's recital?" she asked, almost like a dare. I nodded. Front row this time. As she walked away, she wasn't hunched or hurried, not whole either, not yet, but unfinished in the best sense. Still writing her pages. I stayed a little longer. The coffee I brought for her had gone cold. Still, I left it there beside mine, as if she'd just stepped away and might return for one last sip. The recital was tonight. I walked into the Lincoln High School auditorium alone, chestnut coat still holding faint traces of the day's chill. My stride was steady, not hesitant. There, taped to the first chair in the front row, was the simple sign, "Reserved Grandpa." I scanned the few dozen seats between me and the stage, wondering who'd placed it. I'd never asked for it. And still, someone remembered. Nora's first note drifted through the hush. Debussy's Clair de Lune, tender and haunting. I closed my eyes, the melody carrying me decades back to my own wife's piano. I could almost see her hands curved above the ivory keys, hair catching the lamplight by that old upright. My memories hovered. I pictured her turning to me after the last measure, eyes glistening. I had thanked her then. Now, I simply breathed. During intermission, I stood and stretched. Voices brushed past, almost accidental but clear. "That's the man who reclaimed the firm. She's the one who got exposed. Forged contracts, right?" I felt nothing but calm. Instead, I watched Marla slip through the auditorium door and settle 2 rows back. She didn't look at me. She avoided my gaze, as though I still represented a wound yet to heal. Lights brightened again. Nora returned to the stage and finished with grace. Soft applause followed. I joined in, hands shaking slightly, not from nerves, but from the gravity of what this moment meant. Afterward, the principal approached me, quietly leading me onto the stage. I expected a microphone, a toast, maybe applause. Instead, she spoke into the hush. "For everything you built in this town, thank you." A ripple of recognition echoed softly from the audience, some standing, others nodding. I stepped forward, but shook my head. "Thank you," I murmured, taking a breath. "But tonight belongs to her." I pointed toward the empty chair beside me, reserved yet unoccupied. "Not me." The auditorium rose in warmth at that. I gave a small nod of farewell and slipped off the stage. The next morning, I woke to the news. Holland Creed loses federal contracts after audit fallout. Front page headlines. Marla's name in bold. Officially stripped of all directorships. I poured a cup of tea and settled in the living room to watch the broadcast. My phone lay silent beside me. I didn't smile. I didn't scorn. As the anchor spoke, I simply listened and allowed the outcome to unfold. After the news segment ended, I stood and walked to the photo wall in the hallway. The final frame, a family portrait. Wife, me, Marla as a girl, was still slightly askew. I straightened it, fingers lingering on the glass. The image caught the morning light, soft and forgiving. I turned away and returned to the kitchen to wash my cup. Tea steam curled upward, fading quickly. I addressed you now. Whoever's listening, sometimes we win not by holding on tighter, but by knowing when to let go, with dignity. Quiet power lasts longer than noise. I closed the door to my study, tea in hand. The house exhaled around me, calm, unchanged by conflict, ready to breathe again. On the front row, the chair still bore its sign. Its polished wood reflected morning's warmth, a silent testament that presence matters more than position.